So in our first day of lesson 10.4, we're going to be looking at something that's brand new to all of you, unless you've gotten to it on the Alex program, or maybe you saw it on the NWEA that we took. So as we get into this, I want to start with looking at box plots. Then we can do the interquartile range and things like that that are in the book. We need to understand what a box plot is, what the purpose of it is, and how it is that we create it. So I have a handout for you, and what I want to do is walk through where all of those things come from, what all the 7 steps are when it comes to a box plot. So the first few moments here, I just want you following along and looking at where everything's coming from, looking at the steps that's on it, that's on the screen, as well as on your handout. And then we will practice 3 of them together. I'll have you do the 4th one on your own and see how you do. Then you can have your short assignment. So as we're going through these first few slides, once again, I just want you to follow along. I want you to look at the steps as I'm describing them, and I'm going to show you where the overall image comes from on your half sheet handout, and that would be great for you to keep a hold of. So notice in the red underneath the box plot, it says that we're dividing our data set into 4 groupings. So notice that you have some words up there like quartile, and once again, QUA means a grouping of 4. Right? That's how we get the word cuatro in the Spanish language. So when I look at QUA, I'm putting my data set into 4 equal groups. And that has to start by putting all of them in order from least to greatest. Why? Because I need to start with finding the median, the middle number of the entire group. And if they're not in order from least to greatest, that becomes quite a challenge. So we always take our data set, put them in order from least to greatest. Once I do that, then I work on finding the median. The median, once again, means middle. And so I'm going to cross them off from left to right in groups of 2. If I have an odd number of data set, then I know that the middle number that I circle is going to be my median. However, if it's even, such as this, then I have to find the average or the middle of the 2 numbers that I circle. Basically, I add them together, divide by 2. Then I'm going to put a tally mark up above the number line that I'm given for each of my box plot areas, and that's going to be my first marking of my overall box plot. So first I start by crossing them off left and right in groups of 2 until I'm left with my center numbers. This example, it's an even number of data sets, so I know that I have to add them together and divide by 2, also known as finding what's in the middle of them or averaging them. So when I find the actual median of my group, then I have 3 plus 4, which is 7. And when I divide 7 by 2, well, 2 will go into 7 3 times, which gives me a remainder of 1. Now I'm going to find my decimal numbers, or you could do it as a fraction and get 3 and 1/2. Or when I do a decimal, I raise my decimal, add a 0, bring it down, and 2 will go into 10 5 times. Either way, I'm going to find that 3.5 or 3.5 is my median of this overall group. So where the 3.5 would be, I'm going to make this tally mark, and this is going to be the first mark of my box plot. Notice I'm not putting it over the line, I'm putting it on top of the line, floating up there in the space. Once I've done that, then hopefully I can see where I'm starting to build those 4 equal groups. So when I look at all of the numbers from 0 to 8 in order, what I've done is I've now divided them into 2 equal groups. So my next step is to focus in on the lower. So I've divided the group in half, and now I'm going to divide the first half in half. I'm going to find the middle, right? So you will see that on step 3, we're finding the lower quartile. Once again, that means 4. So we're dividing it into 4 equal groups. Well, I'm going to take my first half and divide it into 2 of them. The way I do that is I find the middle of the first half. When I say the middle of the first half, that means I have to go everything to the left of the median. Now, once again, if I've circled a data from my data set, then I wouldn't count that one. In this case, I haven't circled any of my data sets because I had to find the middle of 2 of them. So I'm going to include everything to the left. So we're going to do it just like we do median, but we're only going to use half of the numbers. So we're going to cross them off in pairings on left and right until I get to the middle. In this one, now I have 2 of them once again. Hopefully you know that that's going to be 1.5 or 1.5, but let's say you don't, and that's okay. Or you do, let's prove it. So we're going to add 1 and 2 together, which gives us 3. And then we're going to divide it by 2, because once again, we're finding the middle of two numbers. And 2 goes into 3 once. I know that I have to raise my decimal and bring down a 0, and 2 goes into 10 5 times. So we found out that it is 1.5 or 1.5. So, as it says at the end of step 3, we're going to make a tally mark. So I'm going to make a tally mark up above the number line to indicate where my lower quartile would be. My lower quartile is 1.5 or 1.5, so it's going to be right between the 1 and the 2. So I've made my second line of my box plot. Now, when I look back over at my group of information, what I've done, if I would indicate where that middle number is, hopefully I'm beginning to see why it's called finding my quartiles, because we just took our first half of our data and split it in half. That's going to be 2 pieces. When I split the next half, I'm going to have 2 more pieces. So now that I have my data divided in half and that half divided in half. So now I have 2 quarters and then the other half. So now that I'm looking at it, I'm going to find the median of the upper numbers. Once again, as I'm doing that, I'm finding my upper quartile mark that's going to divide that upper half into 2 pieces. But when I'm doing that, I want to use everything to the right of the median for the data set. And that means if I have circled a piece of my data, I won't include it. But if I have it, such as this example, I will include everything to the right of it. So that means I have to include the 4 as I'm going through and finding the median of the upper half. I've crossed them off, same process as we have been doing. I circle the 2 that are left. Now I add and divide by 2. Hopefully you know that that's going to be 6.5 or 6.5, but mathematically we want to prove that that's going to be my upper quartile mark. So 6 plus 7 is 13. And then when I divide 13 by 2, I do find out that it's going to be 6.5 or 6.5. So I have to make a tally mark as step 4 says, and I have to know where that would belong. Well, 6.5 is more than 6, less than 7, so it has to go right in the middle of the 6 and the 7. Now I have my third mark, and I want to look at what I just did. So with that third mark, if I would add it to that list of data over there to the right, hopefully I can see that I have indeed divided that into 4 equal groups. Each one is a quarter of the group. So hopefully I can understand why we have 3 different quartile Q1, Q2, Q3 marks, because those are the marks that divide them into my different groupings. So I have my lower quartile, then I have my median or my middle quartile or my quartile 2, and then I have my upper quartile. But now I want to do step 5, and step 5 tells me now I'm going to take those 3 tally marks and I'm going to box them in. And that one's really easy. I'm going to connect my top of my 3 lines, and then I'm going to connect the bottom of my 3 lines. And now I have my box for my box plots. That takes me to my last 2 steps of plotting my box plots. So my last 2 steps then, as I'm looking at it, is called the Whiskers. That's why it's sometimes called a box and whiskers plot. I just call it a box plot because that's what I've always known it as. But the whiskers come from being able to identify as this image says, the maximum and the minimum, or the least and the greatest. And if I have them in order from least to greatest, that makes my job a lot easier. So my first whisker on the left is going to go from my lower quartile all the way down to my smallest number in my data set. So when I look at that, that's a 0. So I'm going to put a tally mark where the 0 is, and then I'm just going to connect it. That makes the whisker to the box itself. Then on step 7, I do the same thing, but I'm looking for my upper whisker, and that is going to take me to my highest number or my largest piece of data. That's an 8 in this data set. So I make my tally mark above the 8, I connect it to the box. So I've created my entire box plot showing all of my data, that my data is divided into 4 equal groups when it comes to the pieces, and then I can focus in when I get to my next lesson on what I can interpret from the